We're focusing on access to justice, and I think it's really important to understand that the Convention on the Rights of the Child has all these articles which one can then say that certain rights have been breached, and that's the value of the optional protocol on a communications procedure. What that is it's a pathway to allow children to receive justice when their rights have been violated. But it is the end point of the pathway. So I should say that children ought to have access to justice first at the domestic level. If children's rights are violated, it must be possible to have an investigation into that and to determine who is responsible and hold them accountable. However, sometimes this doesn't work out, either because the courts deal with it but find that there wasn't a violation and maybe that decision isn't always right, or perhaps in some instances it will take so long, it'll be so impossible to get justice that it's necessary to move to the next stage. And the next stage then, under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, is to come to the committee under the optional protocol on a communications procedure, which is called OPIC for short. And that means that one can bring a claim. One can say, this child's rights were violated and the state that allowed that to happen must be held accountable and must provide remedies. There must be some kind of solution. And what's also interesting is that those solutions can be tailored to meet that particular child or group of children, but remedies can also be crafted in such a way as to prevent future violations. And in that way, it becomes systemic. One is actually able to reach beyond the specific details of that individual child or that group's rights and move to how can we protect the rights of all children going forward. So the optional protocol really does provide us with lots of opportunity to be able to hold states accountable. The only problem is it's an optional protocol, which means that only the states that have ratified it separately from the convention are able to be held accountable under it. Now, at the moment, there are only 52 states that have ratified that, compared with the 176 states that have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. That's definitely not enough. And obviously, the Committee on the Rights of the Child is encouraging states to ratify the Convention because this really does give the fulfillment of children's rights, and it shows that states are taking rights seriously and are willing to be held accountable when there are rights infringements. Some of the cases under OPIC have dealt directly with the issue of birth registration, and I think the emblematic case here is WMC versus Denmark. It concerned a family in which there were 3 children. The mother had come from China. She'd fled China, and she then had 3 children in Denmark. She was a single mum. Her asylum claim failed, and she and her children were then due to be returned back to China. She then started to take up cases within Denmark to object against this, because she said, if we go back to China, the children will not be recognized, because China has a special birth registration system, which is actually like a family registration, called the hukou register. If your name is not included in the hukou register, you really cannot get access to services. It's as though you don't exist. So you cannot get access to healthcare, you cannot get access to education. And she said that if she and the children were returned to China, the children would really suffer. The committee found that in ignoring that or not taking that sufficiently seriously, Denmark had violated the rights of the children, and specifically found that the articles relating to birth registration and identity were at stake here. Another interesting case is GGP versus Paraguay. That had to do with a mum who was trying to establish the paternity of the child. She knew who the father was, but he was denying and he was not cooperating with authorities. And the courts dragged this out for 6 years. This mum was trying to establish paternity, and nobody was really holding the dad accountable, although this matter was seized with the courts in Paraguay. eventually, when that case came to the committee said not only had this been problematic because the mother couldn't obtain maintenance payments, so the child's rights to a reasonable standard of living had been impaired, but also the child's right to identity, because the paternity in some way fills out what your identity is, what name you could carry, and so on. And so the committee there talks about how important the right to identity is in a child's life, and found this to be a violation of Article 8.